Okay, today we're going to be discussing the Unit 5 assessment. So what standards were included on the Unit 5 exam that were previously assessed?
So we retested TEAC 7A, which is adding and subtracting complex numbers, right?
Yeah. Was there any improvement on that standard from the previous assessment?
So on the last one, I'll compare it with what we've got here.
Yeah.
It was right here. So we did all over 70%, and all over still was at 70%. No, 76 to 70.
Yeah.
Same color.
Oh, no. Oh, this is not the same color?
No, it's
not.
not.
Okay,
Sorry.
you switched. Okay.
So we started at 76, and we went down a little bit to 70. So I think that was, like she was saying earlier, we did 2 questions the first time, and this time we did one question.
Right.
Also, it's been a little length of time since I've
I was
done
about
it.
to say, we didn't
It was
go
kind
back
of a
over
surprise. Here it is.
Right, so there was no spiraling within this last unit. It just kind of appeared.
Let's see how much you remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, considering there was one question and no reteach or no review, I think that's a pretty...
and it was formatted differently because it was from the SAT. So we took their formatting, not what they would have seen on their assignment. So it was a very real representation of how they would do when it's not fresh on your mind. It looks different.
Yeah, it had the I equals square root of negative 1 on it, and I think that some people were trying to use the square root of negative 1, and they were...
It was a little different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So looking at the Unit 5 data, which standard is going to be retaught from that assessment?
I think we were going to reteach 4D, which is completing the square, which we got our lowest score of 58% on.
Okay. Right. And how do you guys plan to reteach that standard?
Modeling and direct instruction in particular.
Okay. Where do you think the gap is happening in that standard? Like, what part of the standard are the students not understanding?
Well, it was a long process too, and we had 2 very different questions. And so I noticed a lot of my kids, I almost want to break the data down into the 2 questions because a lot of my kids got the first one right, but not the second one. So the first one just required them to understand the concept of filling in that square.
Yes.
And the second one had them follow through the whole process to get it in vertex form.
Yes.
And even though some of my kids would get the first one right, on the second one, they would choose to graph it and find the vertex and then use vertex form. Because that's something else we had taught, but we had specifically written that question hoping that they would use completing the square. So while we kind of faulted them for not using the right method, they probably still more of them got it right because they used a valid method. It just wasn't the one we were trying to find.
They also, I guess, didn't really understand that those 2 questions were connected somehow.
Right.
So that number 7, you're going to do very similar to what you're going to do with number 8. And they were just like, there's a huge gap between the 2 questions.
Well, I think just adding 2 steps to the problem, they were like, I'm out.
Yeah.
They got the middle part.
Yeah.
And then when you had to move a number and move it back, they were like, oh no, why? Because there was no purpose to that.
Right.
Like when we did the whole find the number, it all made sense to them, but then why in the beginning we set it equal to 0, moved it, and then moved it right back, eluded them. I think if we retaught or taught it spiraled in solving and did it there, so they had the purpose of why we move it over is to solve, then I think it would be better.
Okay, so in the reteach, we're really going to emphasize the fact that you have to move things over and the whole process, not just the piece of the puzzle, kind of putting everything all together in the reteach. And that should help when you guys spiral it back into solving quadratic equations. Okay. So looking past just a unit test, on the curriculum-based assessment, so like your 6 weeks test, how are the students assessed on completing the square?
So on our CBAs, I believe it's very similar to the way we formatted it on our test. They take a standard form equation and they use completing the square to write the vertex form. The only difference with our test was that we didn't make it multiple choice.
Okay.
Our CBA is going to probably be multiple choice, so that may be slightly easier in the fact that they'll be able to graph their equations and match which one.
Oh, that's
right.
So true. I didn't think of that. Like if we retested it and made it multiple choice,
it's going to be a lot easier for them to understand which graph is the same.
Because I think there was a disconnect and they didn't know what we were asking.
Yeah.
Some of them knew it was vertex form, and like I said, they did it the back way. But if it would have been multiple choice, I think more of them would have got it right too.
Yeah. And they possibly could have used their answer choices to work backwards in order to kind of figure out where those gaps were instead of just a blank space.
Yeah.
Okay. If a student was successful in completing the square and you ask them how they knew they got the right answer, what should a student say? So
Well-
like, what should the answer look like?
They should be able to take the two graphs and they should be able to graph and see that they're the same,
Yeah.
right? Because that's
Right.
what we're saying, working backwards from that answer choice, they should look the same. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to design an exemplar question that we're going to use as an exit ticket for your reteach.
Okay.
First thing that we want to do is identify the parts of the answer that you're looking for. So what things specifically are you looking for in order for students to be successful in completing the square?
So we wanted the parentheses with the squares, right? So we wanted that part. So like when we were grading it, what did you look for?
I know, but what I would have looked for would have been different from what you looked for. Because on mine, I was looking for the box.
Oh, you're so right, because you taught it a little slightly different.
Yeah. So I looked
Gotcha.
for the box, and then I wanted to find their perfect binomial square, or the perfect
the
square
parentheses square.
binomial.
And then that C term that came back.
Yeah. And then I also looked for, because completing the square is all about creating that gap, I had mine write and like leave the gap in the
The
equation.
space. Mm-hmm.
So I
Like
looked
it
for
looked
the
like on
space to be filled in, I looked for the box, and then I looked for the final answer, but more so that stuff.
Okay, so the process was more important than
Right.
the answer. Okay.
Which is why I think we chose to make it not multiple choice.
Yeah.
We wanted to encourage the process more than an answer.
Okay, so let's design the exit ticket for this.
Okay.